It wasn't too long ago that UCLA was a 10-win team, finishing in the top 25 and sending guys like Anthony Barr, Miles Jack, and Brett Hundley to the NFL. They've been a national power. 17 conference titles, a Heisman winner, and even a national championship. But we're far removed from those days. A new conference, a head coach who so desperately wanted to leave that he took a multi-million-dollar pay cut. And now, UCLA fans who were already tuned out have even less to look forward to for year one in the Big Ten. Ohio State fans can't say the same, because just hours after Bill O'Brien bounced out for Boston College, they landed the #1 OC target on their board, and the situation he walks into couldn't be better for a guy who wants to run an NFL offense. But now we've got more questions. Why'd Chip take a pay cut and a demotion? What does he bring to Ohio State, and why was he such a home run hire? What went wrong at UCLA, and what's next for their program now that their path to a title just got a whole lot harder? So today, I'm breaking down what happened with Chip Kelly at UCLA, why their administration is to blame for setting their program back for years to come, and who they need to target as their next head coach. But let's start with some context. After Kelly failed in the NFL, UCLA was the perfect program to take him. His name still held weight in college football. He'd already proven he could win in the Pac-12, and he was really motivated to perform so he could get back into the pros. Now, it took a couple seasons, but once they got the offense going and they produced multiple draft picks, 4 years in, things finally started to come together with an 8-win season. Fast forward to last November when his team that started 6-2 finished 1-3, and the rumors that he'd be fired before the bowl games started to spread pretty quick, but they didn't pull the trigger. Kelly coached in the bowl game that they won. The administration didn't want to pay a $9 million buyout, so they were hoping he'd leave, but it just wasn't happening. Kelly wanted to go to the Raiders, but they took Kingsbury. He thought the Commanders would be a fit, but they took Brian Johnson. And while he's interviewing and looking for a fresh start, UCLA's recruiting class kept struggling. In 2024, big-time programs need head coaches who lead like CEOs. It's more than just X's and O's. You've got to play the game with the boosters. You got to build the relationships and get donors to buy into NIL. He never wanted to do that. UCLA used to thrive in the portal, but now that the market's gotten so competitive and they don't have the collective to keep their best guys or bring new ones in, the recruiting class ended up being the worst or the second worst they've had all time. He knew he wanted out because this team wasn't in position to succeed next year, and if he couldn't get an OC job in the NFL, then the next best thing was going to a big-time program where he wouldn't have to build relationships to get donors on his side and where he wouldn't have to be the lead recruiter. So when Bill O'Brien was announced as Boston College's head coach today, Ohio State was an obvious fit. Ryan Day was his QB at New Hampshire. He was his OC with the 49ers, and now that Day doesn't want to call plays and he needs an experienced coordinator who he can trust to manage the most expensive offense in college football, getting the guy who just had an offense that ranked at the top of the Pac-12 in rushing back-to-back years makes perfect sense. Kelly knows how to work with their personnel. He and Day run a similar offense, and being the OC for a national champion contender probably leads to an easier path back to the pros than being the head coach at UCLA who might win 6 games next year. So who do you blame for the UCLA mess? Is it Chip Kelly who made it clear he was looking for an opportunity for months? Or is it the administration who refused to do the right thing and fire the guy who clearly wanted no part in their future? When Kelly went to UCLA, it was an obvious stepping stone opportunity. He needed to prove that he still had it in him, and after we saw multiple strong seasons, an NFL QB in Thompson Robinson, and 16 draft picks in only 5 years, it was clear that he got what he needed out of that job. Instead of paying the $9 million to get rid of him, which I'm sure would have been wiped away for the most part since he wasn't going to retire, they let their recruiting class struggle. And now, moving into a new conference, they have no head coach. The portal's going to be open for their entire roster to enter, and the football program that already struggles to get fans to games and peak interest is set up for a really tough transition, all because the administration allowed Chip Kelly to disrespect their program by refusing to be a CEO and ultimately flirting with every other job opportunity he could find so he could get the hell out of Westwood. Embarrassing. My sister went to UCLA, so I called her before I recorded to get her thoughts as a UCLA fan, but she had no idea who Chip Kelly was, and my guess is if you ask most people associated with that school, they wouldn't know either. So who's the right coach to take over and rebuild what was once such a storied program? Well, here's the list I've seen so far. PJ Fleck, who's 50-34 at Minnesota, won 5 bowl games and would instantly change the culture for the better. Jamie Chadwell, who's been at Liberty for a year but finished with 13 wins and crushed it at Coastal Carolina before that. Barry Odom from UNLV, who's been a coordinator and a head coach at Arkansas and Missouri in the SEC. Tom Herman, who was the OC at Ohio State before he took over as the head coach at Houston, then Texas, and now FAU. Eric Bieniemy, who coached their running backs 20 years ago and who's been so desperate for an NFL head coaching job, but supposedly doesn't have the best relationships with players. And last, the guy who I think deserves the job, should get the job, and would piss me off beyond belief if he left Nebraska, Tony White. As a fan, it's easy for me to selfishly ignore the scenario, but as a realist who wants to see the best guys get plugged into the roles where they can thrive, this just makes sense. UCLA has a culture issue. They have a recruiting issue. Their program's not hot. They're a Big Ten team in Westwood with tradition and plenty of money if the right coach steps in and does what it takes to get it from the boosters. They can recruit locally, they can recruit nationally, and they need a head coach who's not looking at their job as a stepping stone for something else. Tony White's the perfect fit. He's never been a head coach, so he's not looking for the next opportunity. This is the opportunity. He's an alumni, so he cares about the program, and he's seen it at its peak, so he knows what the energy is from fans and what it feels like when they're winning, and he knows how to tap back into that culture that UCLA's managed to lose, even though they've had some winning records. Chip Kelly was an offensive guru, but the defense was the reason they were in the top 25 last season. Bring in an elite defensive mind like Tony White, who can recruit the best guys in the Southwest since he's already coached at SDSU and ASU, and you're talking about a defensive-led program in a conference that requires a strong D if you're going to be successful. Again, of course I want him to stay at Nebraska. I would hate for him to leave, but is there a better opportunity out there for him? As a guy who wants to see other people succeed, my God, how awesome would it be to see Tony White leave Nebraska for a head coaching job in the same conference with the resources to actually win and be a successful Big Ten coach? He makes less than $2 million today, and he'd get at least double that at UCLA. But more importantly, he'd be where he wants to be. He'd be a head coach in a power conference, building from scratch with a long leash since their program's so far behind from where it's expected to be. I'm going to hope they go another direction and that Nebraska gets another year with their entire defense back and that they're led by their star DC. But if he does leave, at least it's for a good job in a great conference at his alma mater. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. Was Chip Kelly an upgraded OC, or were you hoping to see Bill O'Brien run their offense? Does UCLA take a rising coordinator, or will they look for a proven head coach? And what's your thought on UCLA's future? Can they compete and win 6 games this season, or are they going to struggle in a new conference with a new staff rebuilding from scratch? But that's all I've got for today, so until next time, thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Go Big Red.